I hate to ask this question because it's embarrassing. How many of you who are African Americans, how many of you know the African city and country from which your ancestors were born? Except my daughter.
Not one hand went up.
Not one hand went up. I asked this question of 500 whites. How many of you know the city and country? I was teaching at a university, a white university, just outside Philadelphia. Every hand went up. They knew not only the country from which they came, not only the city, but the borough from which their ancestors came. Now, how come they know and none of you know? Here's the reason. And here's the reason why I am different. The reason is that these South Carolina and North Carolina plantation owners went to Germany to find out how they could control our fathers and mothers on the plantation, because they were getting out of hand. They were burning the houses down. They were killing white folks. They were doing everything negative about being in captivity. They were never slaves. They were prisoners of war, the War of 1591. So what happened was they sought the advice of an expert in Songhai history. Now, his name was Johann Blumenbach, and he was the head of the Department of History at the University of Göttingen in Germany. And how many of you know this? I know you was taught this in college and everything, all you college folks. Well, when they sought his advice, they said, do they know that they're the Songhai people? So the plantation owners who traveled over there to seek his advice said, well, of course they know that they come from the great Songhai Empire. Well, that's your problem. You can't let them know that they came from greatness, from grandeur, from beauty, from sophistication. You'll never be able to control them. So the plantation owner said, well, how can we prevent it? I mean, the mothers and the fathers would tell the children, say, you came from Timbuktu and you came from the city of Jané and that's where we were born. And then the Europeans came over and invaded us in 1591 and marched us to the seas, to the waiting ship. Said, man, you can't allow them to teach that to their children. They said, well, how you going to stop it? Here's how you do it. Here's why you don't know where you're from. Blumenbach said, what you do, as soon as a boatload arrives, take the babies out the mama's arms. Send the parents to a distant plantation and work them to death and raise the children to believe that they came from a jungle. They won't know the difference.
That's right.
How would they know?
That's right.
Their parents are gone. Now, here's the difference between me and you. When they captured my grandmother, I'm not going through, you heard the beginning of the story. My grandfather was a lawyer and a sculptor in Benin City, Nigeria. And the English kept on coming over stealing his sculpture.
Wow.
Some of his sculpture ended up at the Art Museum in West Philadelphia, where they came to show it off because it was world-class sculpture.
So have you been able to see this sculpture?
Oh, sure.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got some in the book. But anyhow, what happened was his wife hassled him and said, don't fight the English when they come over, just let them have the sculpture. I'm pregnant, and they'll kill you. Then I'll be a widow, and they'll put me on board ship and take me over there where they're taking all the rest of those prisoners of war. But my grandfather, whose name was Mwale, said, I'm fighting them. I'm not going to let them steal my sculpture anymore. And he gathered some of his fellow sculptors, and they fought the English when they came over to steal. They was always stealing something. And they killed him, killed my grandfather, and put his wife, his pregnant wife, my great-great-great-grandmother on board the ship. And the ship was named Jesus, by the way. That's deep. Deep. I've been angry ever since. Well, at Jesus, I mean, not at Jesus, but and on the way over, the baby was born.
Wow.
All right, name of Diane. She named Diane. Now, it was bound for South Carolina. How many of your ancestors came from South Carolina? Raise your hand.
Oh, boy.
A whole bunch of folks. They were bound for South Carolina. But in 1808, this was 1813, in 1808, a law was passed by Congress forbidding more importations of the Songhai people. We're the Songhai people.
Right.
See, Blumenbach said, don't allow them to even learn that
That's
they
right.
came from the Songhai
That's right.
Empire.
We're going to try to breed them here on this continent
That's
rather
right.
than
That's
continuing
right.
the cultural memory.
They don't even let them learn the name Songhai. Because then they'll start investigating. Then take away their ability to read and write, pass laws against them learning to read and write. Then they can't learn anything about the Songhai Empire. They passed a law, 200 years, a law not allowing blacks to learn to read and write. Well, anyhow, in 1808, this law was passed forbidding any more importations of Songhai people. Now, nobody paid any attention to that law at all except one little group called abolitionists. Now, the abolitionists put their money together and they bought a ship. And they patrolled the seas looking for prisoner of war ships, which you all were trained to say slave ships. They were no slave ships. They were prisoner of war ships.
Very
Were
important.
coming, very important distinction.
That's right.
And when we teach our children, they were never slaves.
That's
they
right.
were children, descendants of prisoners of war. Like McLean. He
That's
was a
right.
prisoner of war.
That's right.
He wasn't a slave.
That's right.
He got captured by the enemy.
That's right.
On the way, this abolitionist ship captured the ship that my great-great-grandmother was on. So instead of this baby being taken from her arms in South Carolina, the ship was towed to Trenton, New Jersey. And of course, Nzinga, who was the baby's mother, my great-great-great-grandmother, taught the baby that her father was a world-class sculptor, that her father was a lawyer, that he went to world-class universities. So I was trained from babyhood, you know, that we've got to right this wrong.
That's right. That's right.
So I was, it's your job, because you were spared by just an act of God, an act of the ancestors, to not let the baby being taken from Nzinga's arms. And the baby grew up, and she had a child. Her name was Mary Diane Thomas, and she was my great-grandmother, and she helped raise me.
Wow.
And so she told me the story when I was a kid, you see. So that's how I know
Wow.
where we're from.
Wow.
That's right.